Welcome to Quantum Command Radio, where we talk about all things quantum. You can visit our website at www.quantumcommand.net or subscribe by clicking the subscribe button and hit that bell button for the latest and greatest within the quantum realm. Together, we will discuss topics related to quantum command, wellness, and explore all the new discoveries within this work. And now, let's go quantum. Hey guys, Natalie Morris with Quantum Command, and today I have something a little bit different. Usually it's you guys sitting here listening to me talk for an hour, but today we have something different, really interesting, and I think you're going to really love this interview. I have an interview with someone named Julianne, and she's actually living in Australia. She doesn't live in the States, and she's been a client of mine for quite some time. And as all of you guys know, what's going on over in Australia is only just a little bit similar to what was going on in California here just recently last year with the fires, but just on such an unbelievable scale over in Australia. It's like the whole country is burning. It's unbelievable. So today, there's a lot of things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the fires, but we're also going to talk with Julianne about sort of her experience with this work. She has a little bit of a different story because she's what you would consider a targeted individual. And if you've listened to my channel long enough, you've heard that word sort of surface in some of the material that I've been creating and putting on YouTube. And if you are in the university, you've definitely heard about it. Because one of the key pieces that I've sort of put together, it wasn't something that I just understood until it kind of landed in my lap and it was obvious, was that when you have a layered technology, you tend to experience symptoms that are related to being a targeted individual. And targeting is really interesting. Well, not interesting. It's not interesting for people that are experiencing the targeting, but in terms of learning about it and trying to quell the symptoms, you deal with a lot of different situations that the targeting is really, really different. So each person with being a targeted individual will have different symptom groups. So we're just going to kind of unpack that idea today. We're going to talk a lot today with Julianne about the deep state, what's going on over in Australia right now, her perspective. She's feet on the ground, boots on the ground, and we're going to talk about the fires and just kind of get a sense of what's going on over there. You know, globally, this whole wave, this whole red pilling process is happening globally. We're seeing it in different pinpointed countries as the Trump administration interacts with folks, with leaders across the globe. And Australia is probably one of the cultures that's kind of most close to America, where in terms of just like similarities, they're super similar. The demographics tend to be similar. And we tend to have the same level of standard of living. So they're, some of the most closest to us in terms of culture. And I think it's going to be interesting to hear what Julie has to say about where they are. So Julianne, welcome. We're just really glad you're here. And why don't you just kind of introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about how you found the work, how this all started for you, because, we haven't been friends forever. So, when did this all start to kind of come together for you, and how did you find this work?
Okay, thanks, Natalie, and hi, everybody. Thanks, Natalie, for having me on. So a number of years ago, I went to a private practice to do mental health and counselling work, and I was coming across people who had far more deep-seated issues than just PTSD and complex PTSD. And as it turned out, I ended up working with some people that would be considered ritually abused. So for me, that became a really steep learning curve. And I searched Australian sites and Australian courses and things like that to be able to learn, and found nothing. So I headed to the US sites, and I was able to find different teachings and different ministries and things like that I could learn very quickly about. And one of those ministries, which Natalie, most of your viewers would probably be aware of, is Bride Ministries International and Daniel Duval.
That's right.
He taught me a lot very quickly, and I'm eternally grateful for that. He also has a podcast. And so, of course, I started listening to that podcast, and I was working here because, of course, our summer is different to yours, and our summer, our hottest time is now over Christmas and New Year. And I was working in my yard. It was very late at night, and I was listening to a podcast with a lady by the name of Natalie and from Quantum. And so I don't even remember what I was doing that night. I was so immersed in what you were saying. I was just transfixed. So I listened and I thought, wow, this work. And I just knew that this work was on point and it was vitally important. And, of course, then the second podcast came out and I was more than convinced. So in the February, so that was in the December when the first one came out. In the February, I actually became a client of yours, and you were able to do a scan. And I think we were probably on that call for almost 2 hours.
Probably.
And everything that you made sense, that you spoke of, just made sense to me and what I'd experienced across my lifetime, but of course with absolutely no clue previously as to what it could possibly have been. So that was my introduction to this work.
Yeah, and the sort of like what happens with targeted individuals is, again, I say this a lot, but I'm not a hammer looking for a nail. So I'm not hunting around looking for targeted people and looking for some type of validation scope from other people validating what I think might or might not be true. That's not even how this work works. Like the body doesn't really care about my belief system. It just cares about what is true. And so when I started to find things like black goo, like smart dust, like artificial intelligence based type programming, and then started to find people, especially after that Dan Duval broadcast, people started coming my way that were targeted individuals because it resonated so much with them. It's sort of like it's like the inside baseball of this work that a lot of people on the YouTube channel don't know about. They know about, some technology. They know about MFI. They know about kind of Morgellons, maybe. I haven't gone into a lot of detail about that. They understand the work a little bit, but this is still fledgling in terms of the public disclosure of some of this. For you and I, we've been living this for you for most of your life, probably all of your life. For me, in the last 15 years, because I got sick. I had no idea that I had layer technology. I just thought I had Lyme disease and I just wanted to get well. But then after I did the Dan Duval show, I realized targeted individuals and technology in the body were prominently linked. It was hugely associated. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what it means to be a targeted individual? What is that? What does that dynamic mean? I mean, I know in my head, but what does that look like for you? How has that played out for you? What are some symptoms that you've experienced through some of that targeting?
Yeah, sure. So targeted individual, as I've probably just previously mentioned, is fairly new for me. I'm nearly 50 and I have had MFI and Morgellons from the day of birth, obviously, until I had the scan in 2018. So I didn't really know what that meant. All as I knew is that I just had devastating issues with my teeth and my jaw, lots of other different smaller symptoms, but all in all, a collection of symptoms and syndromes that just prevented me from getting on and doing what I needed to do in life. I mean, who wants to talk to somebody without a lovely smile? Who wants to go and speak in front of people when they don't have teeth and things like that? And if anybody's ever had a toothache, even just one toothache in their life, that they haven't been able to medicate with pain relief, they will know that it is one of the most awful things to happen. Well, I've had a mouthful of them for since I was a teenager.
And what was it that we discovered that they had put in your teeth?
Well, I had copper and tin.
Right,
So
which you just don't get, you don't just
Yeah.
get it for fun because you just happen to be copper and tin and heavy metals on the periodic table of elements tend to be actually really hard to get. It's extremely unusual, but you had it in the lymph nodes in the body, almost like it was targeted, like almost it was like put there on
It
purpose.
was like concrete.
Yeah.
It was, I likened it, I guess the picture that I got was that it was likened to concrete. It was just set in all that lymphatic in that region, and of course having MFI and Morgellons on the day of birth, my body had never known what it was like to be free and to function of its own accord.
That's right. And one thing I'll just kind of interject here is a lot of targeted individuals, and also there's another phrase for targeted individuals, an experience that they have called gang stalking. That's kind of also sort of part of that sort of ecosystem of symptoms that people get. So when I'm talking about targeted individuals, I'm also talking about folks that experience gang stalking. But one of the things that happens with particularly people that have experienced satanic ritual abuse or targeting from birth is they are injected with things on the day of their birth. And that's a piece of the puzzle that I talked about in my last broadcast about how the pharmaceutical industry is tied in with the technological sort of pathways that come into the body. It's not just something, we don't just go in and get the flu shot. That's not what's happening. We're not getting the vitamin K shot when we're born. We're not just getting silver drops in our eyes. That's what they tell us. That's what they've programmed us to believe. But what's really happening through this work, what I started to discover, which was alarming to me, I did not have on my radar that type of collusion with either DARPA, whoever's making this technology, CIA type stuff in the pharmaceutical industry. I didn't really piece those things together. That wasn't on my radar. I just was thinking, I don't know. I couldn't figure out how they were doing it. And then when people started coming my way, they're targeted. They have these really unique subset of symptoms. They're dealing with like the ecosystem of these symptoms that are like similar in terms of just they have these experiences, they have these symptoms. The symptoms seem to be planned, particular for that person. They seem to be AI, or like there's AI programming going on. They fight against programming. They fight against all these different things that seem like there's something sentient in the body at all times, and they can't seem to get rid of it, and they don't know what it is, and they assume that it's themselves. They just think, well, it's just me. I just have to get over this thing. But it's really AI programming constantly in a sentient form, modulating some of the body responses. And I don't want to talk too much about that. But my point is in saying all that is when you're a target individual, a lot of times what happens is you have the injection and the delivery system through the injection of the pharmaceutical industry at day one. So you don't ever live your life fully free of technology. And that's what people like you and I are trying to get out of through this work is we're trying to get free of all of this sentient technology that's in the body that orients itself to our own genome, memorizes, learns our own genome, and then fights us every day of our life. We struggle. Now, I wasn't born with it, but I had some injections. I don't know, I was around 19, something like that. And then I got MFI and Morgellons. When you get MFI and Morgellons, it's just like a huge entry way of the layer technology. But anyway, so for you, what we figured out, and you were part of that new awareness that I was developing, the association of the target individuals and the technology being in the body, that you got it at age day one. So you've been fighting since you were born.
That's right, and I don't have a lot of memory for probably under 10. But I do know that I was told that I just used to have panic attacks and just be worried and anxious. And I can remember having to go and have an EEG. I had all these leads on my head, and I'd be taken to different specialists, and I'd be taken to dentists. Dentists are still traumatic for me, just with what's gone on with teeth, since very, very early on, including the fact that I've had implants. in my
That's a good
teeth.
point.
Yeah.
What was that? How did that come to light for you? What did that explain for you?
Well, I'm still in many respects trying to work that out, because I had two different episodes where teeth break off and fall out, and there was little tiny implants.
Wow.
In two different, one in an actual tooth like a crown,
Wow.
and another one in a piece of tooth that broke apart.
Wow.
What that tells me is that location-wise, I think I've definitely been tracked as far as location-wise.
Right. So why, it's like, why would they put microchips in people's teeth? I mean, we're talking about when you're talking about stuff like that, you're like, the teeth are coming out of your mouth. You have actual physical hardware in the tooth.
Yes.
The thing that people do is they go, wait a minute. That means that the dentist was doing this. That means that there's like collusion going on in multiple, not that it's not believable. It's just, it becomes a major red pill for people.
Yes, that's right. And I do recall, several incidences where I was forced and nearly had my jaw. I felt like it was broken. I had lots of issues with my jaw, and a dentist getting very cross with me. I don't know what the procedure was. And then again, later on, I worked for the criminal justice system, and we had a specific dentist that we were encouraged to go to. And I remember a surgical procedure that I did not need.
Wow.
And at the time I was like, oh, okay, perhaps this is what I need. But in hindsight, I know that something quite dark was possibly occurring. Yeah, that was in my 20s.
I've had a couple of people who will talk about when they were 7 or when they were 9, they'll go in for getting their tonsils removed, or they'll get a couple of things that are standard, back then that were standard. Oh, we just do that now as a prevention strategy or whatever. And the parents would just consent to it. And I would know that was what was going on with them, that they had those procedures. And I would find technology in their body, and I would say, you were injected with this around age 7 or so. Is there something that you remember happening? She's like, that's when I got my tonsils out. I went in, I got my tonsils out, or that's when I had my whatever teeth extracted, or that's when I went into the dentist and got this, that, and the other. The interesting thing, I don't know if you have access to this on your end, but it's either on Netflix or Amazon, and I can't remember which one it is, but at the end of our discussion, I'll look it up and I'll post it up here so that people can see it. There is a TV series on either Netflix, I think it's Netflix, or Amazon, about taking children off of the street that are international children and bringing them into a special UN type school and implanting microchips in their mouth through dentistry. That's literally the plot line. And the plot line, I mean, it's aimed at kids, like it's aimed in terms of just interest level. Like my kids saw it and were like, oh, we want to watch that. I'm like, that's a little too close to home for me. I don't think we're going to be watching that. I think I'm going to get triggered and I'm just not going to be okay. But they implant the technologies through the dental work. And then the whole theme of the show is there are certain kids that the technology doesn't affect, and they try and rescue the kids that are turned on and off by the technology in their bodies. And I'm sitting there going, I literally have clients that have experienced this, and they just they just disclose what they're doing and what they've done on these television programs, on these shows. So,
well, that's really interesting you should say that, because I spent the first 5 years of my life not in Australia. The first 3 years of my life I was in a probably considered third world country. And if I remember correctly from my scan with you, it was about age 7 months that I was injected with the copper and the tin, and I was injected in the neck.
Yes.
I believe you said. So, interestingly, I did have a conversation with my father, And he went away and checked some facts before he got back to me, and he said that, yes, there was quite a possibility that something like that had happened, and he felt that there was a doctor over there that was injecting, I'm not sure who else, but me, with things like methamphetamine and drugs like that. So, the historical stuff kind of matches up with what you found in the scan.
Yeah.
So, and part of the process of my mind thinking and putting all of this together was, how the heck did they know that I was over there? Well, now when you talk about the targeted individual and the tracking and the gang stalking and things like that, there's your answer.
That's right. Because they can geolocate, they can
Yes.
Geolocate you. We think of a microchip as just sort of like, what Sweden's doing when they put a little microchip underneath their skin there on their hand, and it helps them unlock their computer and unlock whatever and buy plane tickets or train tickets or something like that. But this is different types of technology. This is beyond just sort of like a typical implant. It bends light, it fragments time, it begins to control the genetic material of the body. And not only, tracking is just like saying that your computer helps you email. That's just one of many, many things that a computer can do. And that's the way these technologies work, is these technologies work on a genomic level. Yeah, it's very handy to be able to look up, case number 7241682. Oh, that's Julianne. Where's she at right now? Oh, she's in a coffee shop. And AI is really doing all that. AI is doing all the interaction. That's how the targeting feels so individualized, is through that. And it's maddening, because those of us that feel that individualization, we just want to get free. We just want to get well.
Yes, absolutely.
How's that recovery process been for you? What sort of have you discovered sort of working? The work helps definitely, because we're doing the layered, tech removal all the time. But what has really helped you in sort of managing, what you're dealing with?
I think knowledge is important. Before hearing about this work, and obviously before getting the quantum release in the first instance, I had no clue. I had no clue what was going on. That was life for me. I did not know life outside of that. Trauma, you talk about negative core beliefs. You talk about what you think about yourself and what you're capable of. I just look back now and go, my goodness, it just all makes sense now. I remember the day that we did that scan. I was exhausted. I had to go home and sleep for 7 hours, and then over the next couple of months, I just felt a renewal in energy and vigor, and my thoughts weren't racing. I could get tasks done. I wasn't like totally
brain fogged.
Yeah. Dismembered is the word that's coming to my head, but that's not really what I mean. Right. I'm fragmented is the word that I'm chasing. But brain fog and things like that. I was able to function. I was actually able to get things done without distraction, without actually being on 99 different timelines.
Right.
Which is amazing feeling, to actually be able to do stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So yes, over the last 2 years, I just feel better and better and better. But as you say, with the targeted individuals and the layered technology that they may have, if something goes down, something else steps up. And it's always in regards to my teeth or my face, my jaw, my neck, or my joints. Yes. And recently it's been my feet. How to keep me down, make sure I can't walk, because I walk everywhere. I do a lot of things. I can't get stuff done.
Yes.
So on the whole, yes, definitely better, but there's still bits and pieces.
Right. That dynamic, and I'll just explain it to listeners, is when you have layered technology, You have an AI-based subset of hardware in the body that's been put in the body in a variety of ways, either an injectant or other ways that they have other modalities of targeting. And when you remove a piece of technology, the backup system or the next piece of technology comes online and begins to rerun those programs. So if your programs are targeting your teeth, your mouth, like for me, it was always pain in my digestive system and my lymph system. For other people, it's headaches or leg pain or back pain or hypermobility or arthritis, or there's like a ton of different iterations of how AI can attack the genome. When you have a piece of technology, and all my targeted folks know when I remove something, because there's this cumulative effect of where they're like, oh man, I was feeling good for like 8 hours and then I crashed. And it must have been, and then they'll message me and I'll say, well, I did find something around noon today and I've been finding technologies. They're like, that makes sense, because they can feel the tech. Once you know the dynamic and the process, you can feel the technology coming online in your body after a piece has been removed. And the way that works is when I remove a piece of technology in me, for example, it's quantumly entangled on a grid-like system to anyone else that has that technology. So it's in my next door neighbor, it's in Julianne, it's in Joe, it's in Mary, and it's all in, and it's quantumly entangled. Our bodies, the muscle testing, the work that I do, we're not quantumly entangled. It's not like I'm taking technology out of me and it comes out of Julianne because we happen to work together. It's because the quantum entanglement is grid-like. So if I take it out of me, it immediately affects everything else on that grid and it collapses that grid. So when you collapse that grid, it removes that algorithmic based control of the genome, so that the genome gets a break for a little bit. And then that next piece of technology comes online, reinstitutes that programming for the symptoms that it can control and manifest. And then you begin to have those symptoms again. They call a flare up. They flare up or they begin again. And a lot of my target individuals that are, I guess one of the main reasons that they use this technology is to remotely target you. None of us are being herded into concentration camps and tormented and tortured on hospital beds. We're being remotely tortured. That's how that works. And just like a little piece of information, if you want information that is really good about the remote torturing, Brian Tew, this is for my listeners. If you go to his channel, he's a very small channel, and he is usually in crisis when he's videotaping, but he has extremely accurate information about how the dynamics of this remote torture technology works. He is on target with it. So he's attacked on a regular basis, but he's a really good go-to. But anyway, let's get back to Julianne. And so I just feel like this dynamic has really, for me, explained a lot in my own personal life, but I think for target individuals, they just resonate with the way that this paradigm works.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to a couple other topics, because there's a lot more to talk about. Here,
Sure.
What's going on in the U.S. is we're having a bit of a red pilling ourselves. A lot of what's going on here with Trump, there's like two streams of thought going on. There's Trump is a good guy and he's helping our economy and this is awesome. And yeah, he's a little abrasive and we don't really like how he does things, but he's getting it done, man. And I got more money in my wallet. Then there's like this other stream, this QAnon stream of thought. There's this underground sort of discussion of deep state, and people are going to get arrested and we're going to see child traffickers go to jail. And this is being red pilled. We're being red pilled right now, which I just feel like this work is enough of a red pill sometimes. I'm just like, sometimes I can only handle what I can handle. But with him, the US is really waking up. There's a lot of conservatives that are waking up. That I hope the church is waking up, although I don't have a lot of hope in the church right now, but that's just because I get kicked out of churches when, I come in and do this work. But It seems like things are starting to wake up, but Australia is totally different. You guys are on the other side of the world. You have a different dynamic. What's it like over there? Are people seeing what Trump is doing? Are they clued in? Do you see an awakening coming for Australia? What's happening with all that?
I think it depends whereabouts you sit, as you guys call it, the red pilling. There are certainly people in Australia who are red pilled. There are certainly people asking questions, talking about it. A lot of it's more dealt with by satire and that type of thing. Australians, in my opinion, tend to just not like Trump. They don't seem to see what you guys over in the US are seeing happening on the ground. I would say that a lot of the sections of Australian Christians, spirit-filled Christians, get it. They get it. They get it that Trump is cleaning out the swamp.
Yes.
So that's terminology that you guys use.
Right.
And there are those of us that listen to that we pick up on it. But like you say, it's remote. You're on the other side of the world. We don't seem to acknowledge that type of thing, A, exists here, B, is being cleaned out, or right, C, has any remote attachment to what Trump's doing in America. However, like I said at the beginning, there are people that get it and there are people that understand. And there certainly are connections.
Do you guys have a deep state? I mean, you guys, we have what we call a deep state. Do you guys have that deep state? I mean, before our call, like during the pre-interview, you were talking about how there's some good signs kind of going on with what's happening in your leadership. Tell us a little bit about that.
There are. Well, our current Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, he's a Pentecostal Christian. And we had a federal election, and just for your listeners' information, in Australia it's mandatory to vote. We don't get to choose whether we vote. It's mandated.
No kidding.
Yeah, wow. All of us. The moment you're over 18.
Just like right now we're talking about voter ID and that kind of stuff. What is your, how do you guys do it? Do you have a voter ID? Do you have a card? How does that work? You just walk up?
No, we show up at a school, at a public school, and we say our name. They look on the list. They say, have you voted in this election already? We say no, and they put a line through our name, and off we go and fill in our ballot.
No kidding. So it's mandated. What happens if you don't vote? Just wondering. I was just wondering.
We get fined.
You do?
We get fined, about $110 fine.
Gotcha. Wow, that is really interesting. Okay, interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so we've had a lot of big things going on in Australia. First of all, Scott Morrison was elected. His party won the election, and he is very well recorded in saying that it was a miracle and that he still believes in miracles. Now, the Christian community in Australia did a lot of praying over that. So that's the good sign. That's a good sign in and of itself. There's some other talk, and this is certainly not recorded in everyday media because the everyday media is held by
conglomerates,
less than 1%.
That's right.
Less than 1%, and most of us know who that is. But the underground media, and the fringe reporting is certainly around the fact that that our current Prime Minister has some association via probably good friends with the QAnon.
Huh. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting because QAnon, for those of you guys that don't know, if you don't know who QAnon is, I'm really sorry. You should definitely immediately
need to look it up.
Go look it up and go look at QAnon posts because you've got some verification going on with the QAnon that's verifying president type stuff, verifying where he is, what he's doing, and also giving intel to the community. Because one of the most frustrating things that the Americans are dealing with, you know how Americans are, what we do is when we see a problem, we want to solve it right now. Like, we're just going to fix that. We're going to immediately implement strategies to fix that problem right now. And we just tend to be super aggressive in problem solving and especially against evil. So if we see evil, we need to get rid of this right now. Let's stop that immediately. And what we've been discouraged with is we've not seen any arrests. We've not seen anybody go to jail. We've not seen anybody prosecuted. It's all been sort of this underground, like quiet thing going on. And we as the people are getting frustrated. We're getting frustrated and we don't understand why this isn't happening faster. And it's interesting with QAnon because he gives us intel that keeps us sort of satisfied for another 2 or 3 months and keeps us online. And one of the hugest pieces of this deep state QAnon piece is the sex trafficking. And you guys just had you were telling me about a royal commission that's just happened, which royal commission we don't understand what that phrase means. So tell us a little bit about that.
It's like a parliamentary audit inquiry.
So it's like an investigation.
Yeah, it's a very big. They call evidence. They put a committee in. They put someone in to oversee that, and they investigate. So they call for public submission. They call for people to come and give evidence before the committee. It's called a royal commission because, as you know, we're still in the Commonwealth.
Yes,
the British royal family in the Commonwealth. We've just recently had the findings published from a royal commission into institutional child sex offending. So that's looking at churches, it's looking at schools, it's looking at any institution within this country and any of the abuses that were committed against children while in the care of churches, priests, teachers, what have you.
So this was a national, like people knew about it. Like this isn't some hidden, like quiet little investigation that some, like we have like federal attorneys, the Department of Justice, where there's a quiet little investigation going on and they're not really talking. It's not really, this is really public.
It was really public and it was funded over a number of years, and there was also funding made available for victims that came forward for counselling and support. And there's also reimbursement and restitution available for some of them as well.
Wow. What kind of scope was it? Did they find just really flagrant? Did they identify certain groups like this church, that church? I mean, did they
No one was untouched.
Wow.
No one was untouched.
Wow.
I think probably...
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think most churches were possibly mentioned.
Wow.
And other institutions.
For us here, we have the Catholic Church scandal. I mean, every 2 or 3 months you're hearing about a diocese being either raided for information, like they come in, they grab the files and go, or some priest getting arrested, or somebody going to jail, or victims coming in. It floats up onto the news like maybe once every couple months, and then it sinks, like nobody hears anything. But in Pennsylvania here, which is a little bit north of where I am, Pennsylvania, they just finished a report. This is a New York Times article that I'll post here. Catholic priests abused 1,000 children in Pennsylvania, report says. And this report was bishops and other leaders of the Roman Catholic Church in Pennsylvania covered up child sex abuse by more than 300 priests over a period of 70 years, persuading victims not to report the abuse and law enforcement not to investigate it, according to a searing report issued by a grand jury on Tuesday. This was August 14th, 2018. And I can tell you, let me just read this. I'm not going to go into super detail, but it catalogs horrific instances of abuse. And we're talking about priests that raped children, that tied them up, that impregnated children and arranged to have an abortion. And here's the thing. It says the sexual abuse scandal has shaken the Catholic Church for more than 15 years, ever since explosive allegations emerged out of Boston in 2002. Here's the deal. I can tell you one thing right now. if the Baptist church was ever accused of this type of scope of child abuse, if the spirit-filled churches, like Church of Christ, or I don't really Church of God, or I don't really know what the spirit-filled charismatic followings, whatever, were accused of this, if your local school district was accused of this, we're talking about here in the States, they would all be shuttered and closed, and the word Baptist would be a cuss word. But they seem to evade justice over and over and over again, and it's so refreshing to hear that somebody's doing something, that something's happening. Are you seeing people going to jail, or is anybody going to prison?
Yes.
Or how's that working out?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got friends that it's closely impacted, and the abuser in that situation has been sentenced to jail. They're in prison right now. And you'll possibly, I'm not sure if you guys got much coverage, but Cardinal George Pell, who is very close to the Vatican, he is an Australian. He is sitting in an Australian jail right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hopefully telling all. And telling on his, telling on, his other perpetrators that were abusing children, and maybe confessing a little bit more.
Well, he appealed and lost the appeal. So,
wow, good. Wow.
So that's very high up in the Catholic Church. And like I said, no church has been untouched. And you just mentioned a minute ago about, if your Baptist church and your Spirit-filled and your charismatic churches, well, unfortunately for us is the Hillsong Church, which is a huge Australian Christian churches, which is previously Assembly of God.
Which is also highly followed over here. Hillsong is huge over here in terms of their music and their influence. And we are extremely compartmentalized to anything going on over there. We do not get that data.
Well, like I was going to say, unfortunately, our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, he attends a church that is very closely aligned with that. And the lead pastor of Hillsong over here, Brian Houston, his father was accused of child sex.
Wow.
So there's a real rot or a real stink around that, and it's sometimes, you're judged by association.
Yes.
But our Prime Minister, at the end of the report, and when they published the report and the findings, he did apologise. He made a public apology to all the victims in Australia from the institutional child sex abuse. And it's very interesting that when he actually made that speech, he used a word that was not part of the investigation. It wasn't part of the Royal Commission, but he got a word in, and the word was ritual abuse. Now, that has been tracked back to his association via friends with the QAnon movement.
I see.
They were able to get that word in. So that's a message to those who know, to those who are red-pilled, and to those that know that our Prime Minister is likely to be red-pilled. And that's good news.
That's extraordinary, especially to slip in a word like that, ritual. When you're talking about ritual abuse, what we're talking about is satanic ritual abuse.
Yes.
We're talking about institutionalized ritual abuse on children and programming children for different types of functions into adulthood to serve the deep state, serve the people that are doing the satanic ritualist abuse, and that's how the trauma occurs and how the programming occurs is through that abuse, those abuses. And then there a lot of times what I've found with people that have SRA type background is they've been injected with technology to make them more programmable, to it's all tied together, and the sex trafficking piece still is bubbles on the surface. There's just, I think one of the reasons why Trump started putting the border up was he wanted to close those gaping wide holes of the sex trafficking coming in from the South, from Mexico. And it is criminal what's been, obviously it's criminal, but it's criminal to the degree that the Democrats, and I don't get super political on this channel, but I mean, at this point, let's just call a spade a spade. These Democrats are obstructing completely common sense things that would keep these things from happening. And it's almost like they're aiding and abetting at this point. At this point, if you're watching somebody drowning and you're preventing someone from throwing them a life preserver, you're aiding and abetting in that person's death. You are
Absolutely.
responsible. And when we don't speak up, when we don't share our stories, when we don't help others in need, when we don't help seal up the border, when we don't do these things, when we cover up the institutionalization of the Catholic Church, I'm talking about that is institutionalized. It is a global problem.
It is a network.
It's a network. And who are they networking to? Who are these people networking to? It all trickles down to our local areas. We think it's just like one-offs, but they're not. These are global networked sex trafficking rings, SRA abuse. We just, in our innocence or naivete, can't believe that the deep state is that evil. And that brings me to the point of the fires, of what's going on in Australia. You are literally boots on the ground. I mean, you are feeling, hearing, smelling the fires. You see them. You are, because you're in the sort of what we would call the rural area, and it's just all around you. Tell us about what's going on there.
Yeah, well, Australia's been burning for a number of months, and there's a lot of factors that come into it, and locally we've just got such arguments over it's the drought. Yes, we are suffering from terrible drought. There's a lot of heartbreak and a lot of devastating things happening to people due to the drought. But on the other hand, there's also policies that the Greens, and they're the conservative type, conservation type people, have outlawed or will have put through legislation that has made it illegal to do what's called control burn and manage the fuel in off-season in the cool. So
which is exactly what happened in California. Was they were supposed to be doing these controlled burns to prevent these things.
Yes.
And the fire just went out of control because nobody was doing prevention strategies, because, oh my gosh, don't touch the planet. We just have to let it, do whatever it's going to do. And we can't, but the reality is that we're supposed to manage the planet. You can't just let it kind of go.
That's exactly right. So they've outlawed the hazard reduction. So and if you look back, we've got the Aboriginal Australians who have been touted to be the oldest civilization, the oldest living civilization in the world. They managed the land by burning. So there's now calls for them to be back and to sit on committees and advise how to do this. So we've got fires burning everywhere. The whole of Australia's burning, you could more or less say. And I just had a real quick check of the stats just a little bit earlier on. And 5,900 buildings have gone. Wow. So that's 2,204 homes, 29 dead, 10.7 million hectares have burnt, which is 26 million acres.
Wow.
1 billion animals are dead. And the other thing is that some of them will be extinct.
And the irony is if the climate change environmentalists would just allow for the conservation of the land to happen through different, really good strategies, you would have none of that. You would actually have none of that. It's ironic. You don't touch something, you don't allow people to manage something in so many, and it's almost like it's deliberate. It just feels like the way these climate change activists and all this stuff is happening, it's all programming. It's all because the end game does turn out like this, because that's what they want. They want these areas to burn. They want Australia to go up in smoke. They want California to be burned. And there's discussion, when the California stuff was going on, there were a lot of normal, people looking at it going, wait a minute, this isn't just about conservation problems. There's something else going on here. why is everything on fire? And it didn't make sense. And people began to start watching the data from, 40,000 foot view, watching different fires being ignited instantaneously. And the conclusion that people started to draw was they're hiding something. There's something else. The climate change piece and the arson arrests and all of that is all surfacey stuff.
Yep.
Do you think there's something else going on with the fires beyond just sort of your typical drought problems and management problems?
Absolutely, because we've had hazard for years. These practices of prescribed burning has been outlawed for a long time.
Wow.
And we're in drought, so
Right.
a lot of areas are just dust. Why this year? 183 or so people have been arrested for starting fires. That's
a lot of people for starting fires.
That's a lot of people for starting fires. And in my respectful opinion, it's not got anything to do with climate change.
Right.
It's man-made. There is arson to be blamed, and 85% of these fires are due to human activity. But
yes.
Why? And that begs the question, why? Why are they burning simultaneously? I mean, they're talking about these fires are joining up and becoming mega fires. And
you wonder.
Coming from the mindset that I am now in, I have to wonder, what are they hiding? Right. What are they burning? What evidence are they burning?
Right.
What are they trying to get rid of? I mean, there's a connection somewhere.
There is. There is. And it makes me wonder, you look at what was happening in California, which is Democrat controlled state. It's, LA, San Francisco, it's literally becoming filth and squalor. And these are all Democrat controlled cities, Democrat controlled areas. And the fires began to happen and people thought they're hiding some type of evidence. They're hiding it. They're burning it. I mean, what's the best way to get rid of evidence? Is to burn it, and then rinse it with water. And if you can control the climate, I never believed in these types of things. Before I started finding technology in the body, I was just like a normal person who wanted to live a normal life. But when you see how the technology in the body is so intelligent and so controllable remotely, it's not very strange to me that they could control the climate. It's not strange to me to think that they could just create storms or create droughts or to create, lack of rain. That's why California started burning, was because supposedly of the droughts. It was just like a tinderbox. And in Australia, it makes me wonder because you guys are part of the Five Eyes, which not a lot of people really know about, but it's part of like this international collaboration. And Five Eyes allows Americans to go, like New Zealand's also part of Five Eyes. You could, if you're, an FBI agent in the US, it's illegal, or CIA, it's illegal to spy on a fellow citizen without, considerable amounts of paperwork and court approval and all that. But if you go to Australia or go to New Zealand, part of the Five Eyes, you can access their information on the person that you want to have spied on. So you can farm out spying to other countries and then get that data. And so as that collaboration happens, what other types of collaborations are happening in the background on the actual physical land?
Absolutely. I mean, there's, the mind really boggles. It really does. And I think you're right.
Yeah. And I think with what happens with this work, one of the things that happened when the California fires were going on is I was scanning people in real time, finding things in the body that was going on during the fires, and it gives you more information. It gives you information of maybe that's what they're doing. And I'm not going to go into that today, but it's still something that we have to stop thinking that what's happening around us is normal. We have to start thinking that a lot of these events are coordinated and deliberate and there's a reason why. And it just makes me wonder, with the sex abuse going on, with the commission that just happened, with that coordinated effort to resolve those issues, maybe the Australians, maybe your folks will wake up. Maybe they'll be shaken awake, and maybe they've been given a reprieve, just like we have with Trump in office and with your prime minister in office.
Well, that's exactly right. But he's dreadfully unpopular at the moment because right at the height of the bushfires, he was over visiting you guys. And so he's copping a lot of flack for the fact that he, abandoned the country and went on a holiday to the US. They say he went to Hawaii. There's other reports he was in New York, helping open a church.
Wow.
Not quite so sure, but he certainly had to fly back, and he has copped a lot of disrespect around that. And there's other little bits and pieces, like the New South Wales Premier, I believe, rejected an offer by the Navy to evacuate people off beaches. So Victoria said, yes, please. So there's all this other stuff going on at a state level,
right,
as well as at a federal or a Commonwealth level.
Yeah. It is a complicated issue. And when you have very limited information from the news and you have very little information from the state, sometimes it's just a hot mess. And, I was looking online last night about, how deep you guys are really experiencing these fires, and it's just unbelievable. And we're just praying for you guys. We're praying for Australia. I know I am. I was so angry yesterday going, God, when are we going to get justice from these people? These people are burning our countries down, literally burning our countries down. We need help. We need divine intervention. It's almost like when you're begging God to get a spanking. It's like, just please, Lord, I'm willing to take a spanking. Just do it. Can you just help us out here? Clear the decks so that we can get on with things. And that's kind of how I feel. And that sense of welling up, that sense of needing justice really bad is really very, very palatable here. And I just hope that Aussies really there's a red pilling process that starts to go. And I have a feeling that's probably why your prime minister came over to our side, is how do you, to inquire, how can we best red pill Aussies? How can we clean up the mess, clean up the deep state? Because I'm sure you guys have that there too.
Oh, absolutely. But it's deeper. It's deeper here. That's the issue.
It's a lot more hidden.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. And like you say, we're pretty easygoing over here. We're pretty, we just want to get on and live our life and just do what we need to do. We don't need to worry about all that other stuff.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, as in the natural, as so in the spirit, and Australia's burning. So what is burning in the spirit? That's the big question.
That's a good word. That's a good word. That's a great way to kind of round out.
That's a word from my friend. That's a word from my friend, and I agree with her 100%.
Wow.
Because we've had. I know we haven't got time to go in this, but just for context, like we the whole of Australia voted for equality in marriage. Okay, so that's a political thing there, with the LGBTQI community now legally able to marry. All the different states have had votes on abortion. New South Wales, where I live, it's just passed legislation that's, is allowing abortion up until 40 weeks. There's all sorts of other clauses that are in there. They're not allowed to give assistance to babies born alive. There's all sorts of horrendous things that are within that act. Yeah, God help us. That's right. So why are we burning? Well, back to that statement, from that my friend said, as in the natural, so in the spirit.
That's right. That's right. I think this is a wake-up call, I hope, for
I believe
folks
so.
on your end, folks on our end.
Yeah.
And I can tell you there have been many times where I've talked to my husband and said, maybe we just need to, let's move out of town. Let's move out of the country. Let's go to a place where we could like fit in, like Australia, where we look similar to everybody. We wouldn't stand out. We could kind of hide, because the heat here was looking pretty bad. If Hillary Clinton had won the election, it would have not been pretty for folks like us. And we were looking for kind of a way out. What do we do next? Like, what could we do? And I hope that this, as we just kind of finish up this conversation, because we're rounding out to about an hour here, what do you feel, what would you have people walk away with, in combination of this work, in your experience, in the hope to come, what do you see kind of coming? What do you feel people need to hear and people need to understand, in regards to whatever, deep state, this work, or, your experience, any of that?
Information is freedom. Some people don't want to hear this stuff. They're not ready to hear this stuff. It's too much. Not everybody needs to go to the deep, deep level of information. But what I would love people to know is that there's hope. There's always hope, and this work provides so much hope. It provides freedom from a lot of physical stuff. It's something that will set so many people free in their bodies, in their minds. As far as the rest of it's concerned, you will know of it, you will learn of it when you need to.
That's a great.
When you're ready and when you need to. But this work is the start. This work really is the start.
It's really interesting. I think I found my walk's been a little bit different, but I've just seen with other folks, God will move you into the waters deep as you can handle it.
Absolutely.
For me, I wanted to make quick work of my illness and I wanted to get it done with. And God said, well, I'm just going to throw you in the deep end. And I know it's going to feel like you're not swimming and you're not keeping your head above water, but I promise you, you're not going to drown. And I promise you, I'm going to be there for you. And I think a lot of targeted folks feel that way. And I feel like a lot of people in pain feel that way. But this has done
Absolutely.
a couple things. This has just revealed to me, it's revealed the works of the enemy.
Yes.
Who knew that this was going on in the background? And all we need to know is to know. We just need to know. What does the scripture say? My people perish for lack of knowledge. Most of the time, people go down, they drown because they don't know. They just don't know how to get that life preserver, put it around themselves. They've never been trained and they don't know. And that's what we're doing. I think that's what this channel does on a little tiny microcosm in our tiny little ecosystem, is we're just red pilling people, sort of slowly. There's more out there. There's more going on than we really just look at the, I tell my students this, I probably shouldn't say this on the YouTube channel, but I'm just going to say it anyway. It doesn't matter. The whole flat earth thing is really interesting. And then we'll close up. This whole flat earth thing is really interesting. And I told my students, I said, just go look up some flat earth stuff. And I told them it doesn't matter to me that the flat earth is right or wrong. That's a huge thing in the red pill movement. Is the earth flat? Is it round? And it's interesting. It's an interesting discussion. I said, it doesn't matter to me whether or not the earth is flat or what the shape is. What matters to me is that people are thinking outside of the institution. And if you can start thinking outside of the programming in the institution, that's all I care about. And that's what this work is about. And that's what red pilling is all about, is questioning the authorities, questioning the towing the party line, not doing that anymore, and thinking through that there might just be something else going on. So I just want to thank you, Julie.
Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Julianne, for coming in. Any other comments before we go for today?
We're only ever going to be given as much as we can handle. And sometimes we need to learn the discernment first. Do I need to know this, or do I need to know this now?
Very good.
And I just want to really encourage people, just to really just look up and ask. Show me.
That's right. Even though we say things It doesn't matter. You better be going to Dad first. Go to Father first.
Exactly
What
right.
do you want me to know? What do you want me to hear? Am I going to get super overwhelmed by this?
Yep.
What do I need to know for my personal situation?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. You
It's
got
great.
it.
Yep. Well, just thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure that a lot of
It's my
people's
pleasure.
minds are just really spinning right now, and they're just thinking, what do I need the Lord to show me today? And that's my prayer for everyone. So we're going to close up for today. And thank you so much, Julianne, for coming on.
That's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you do.
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you for
And I
what you
couldn't do
do.
any of this without people like you. Just, a lot of my work in the early time was I need somebody to scan. I need to work on somebody. Sit still so I can scan you. So with people willing to just kind of put their feet in the water. So if you guys are interested, as we close up, if you're interested in this work, go to my website, quantumcommand.net. You can also schedule with me there as soon as I fix my scheduler. I know you guys are trying to schedule. I'm having a really hard time with my scheduler right now. I'm having some technical difficulties. You'll see that online. And I apologize for that. I hope to have that up within the next week. I know it's a delay. Believe me, I know. I'm so sorry about that. So just thank you for your patience for that. So if you are interested in more of this content, please subscribe. Please comment if you'd like. I can't always get to comments, but I definitely try and read them. And check out my other broadcasts. And we will see you on the next broadcast. Take care.